Welcome to DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the sports capital, where we shine a light on local stories from the District, Maryland, and Virginia. And today, across the country, to inform, enlighten, and inspire you, I'm Barbara Britt. Well, as you well know, coronavirus has so many folks on edge, and it really can be taking an emotional toll on your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. Folks are scared about getting sick. They're worried about work and about finances, taking care of kids, how to check in on elderly parents and neighbors. And my guest is a regular here on DMV Spotlight, and we're so delighted to welcome back Michael Shea. He's a clinical social worker with a private practice of holistic psychotherapy here in D.C. for over 25 years. And thank you so much for taking time today. It has been a very busy week. And Michael, thank you for joining us today on DMV Spotlight.
It's a pleasure to be with you and Ken again. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Of course, that's Ken Hunter, our wonderful engineer. And so, Michael, obviously there's many components here to coronavirus, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to reach out to you to really talk about the emotional side is real, isn't it? It
is real. It's real. And I think the part that's so important is how you started the introduction. Your radio show is to support and inspire and inform. And right now we need to be inspired, informed, and we need to be aware. And all of us are in this moment where we could be in fight or flight and catastrophe thinking, and we could go down a path that would put our immune systems and our emotional or endocrine systems in overdrive, and that won't help. It'll cause a stress response that actually will make us more immune deficient, not a good thing, and emotionally more reactive. Or we could go to the other place that the mind can go, which is the relaxation response, and slowing down enough to identify, what am I feeling? Okay, I'm feeling scared. Okay, what can I do right now about that? Maybe I could do a breathing exercise. Maybe I could call a friend and talk a little bit about that. Maybe I could do something creative with art. Maybe I could write about it or do an exercise to identify and express my fear and move on, where potentially I could come up with insight and inspiration and potential wisdom that my fear brought to me because I slowed down enough to identify what I'm feeling, and I came up with a plan of action in real time. And then subsequently, it offered me an insight that I could share with another, whereby suddenly, instead of being absorbed in my emotion of me, just me, I could, as a result of caring for myself, move beyond myself and think about the we. This is an opportunity at the same time that we are in this intense emotional experience that no one is spared. No, we actually have a moment in our human history right now where the playing field is equalized. No other human being, no matter what title they have, no matter what creed they profess, no matter what gender they are, no matter what they do and how they love, all of us are equal in this. And that's a powerful opportunity. And for me, that's what I'm bringing to my sessions with people as they sit with me, because that is the moment of empowerment. So is this emotional? Absolutely. But we have a choice today. And that choice might be harder for some people, particularly if you're at home with your children, and that's not the norm, because they're suffering too. So we have to do, we have to model good behaviors. Or what do we do with that elderly person who is sitting, who hasn't seen anybody? They need somebody to call them and listen to them and give them some kind of insight and opportunity to express themselves, because they matter too.
And those are good starting points too, Michael, because I do think that there are ways that hopefully you will work through with us in talking to, perhaps it is an elderly parent, perhaps it is a child. Children, as you mentioned, of course, we're all impacted by this on that playing field that is now level, that is now, quote, equal, that that children do have their fears. Children, they'll say, "Mommy, am I going to get this? Daddy, am I going to die?"
Right.
These are the things, Michael. How do you, as a parent, how does someone as a parent respond to that? Where recognizing that that's a real fear. I know just from talking to you enough that we don't want to diminish the question or the emotion per se, but we do want to be able to give them, of course, reassurance.
Mm-hmm. It's a really thoughtful way of saying it. And as you could tell earlier, I'm pretty impassioned about this from an opportunity. I think what I'm inviting a lot of us to do is to slow down our interactions and say in words sometimes the obvious, that in our words they're vessels of help, and particularly with young children. So if a young child were to ask, "Am I going to die?" I mean, who expects to be asked of that, of their child? No one. That's a very vulnerable question. So that child is coming to the parent or any adult in vulnerability. Well, I think one of the ways we deal with people when they feel vulnerable is we slow down. And we say, "Hey, that's really an important thing that you just told me that. And you know what? I'm going to do everything I can to help protect you and to teach you how to protect yourself so that possibility doesn't happen."
I love how you put that, because then it gives the child some feeling of control over the situation in a situation where, frankly, seasoned adults don't feel very much like they're in control. Because as you mentioned, we have members of Congress, we have, people of every walk of life who have tested positive. Doesn't mean they're going to die. A lot of people have it and they recover, and we need to focus on that as well. And there's also sort of, for people that I've spoken to, there's sort of a ping pong effect where there are some times where you're very, very agitated, and then other times you're just going to say, we're just going to tough it out. We're going to get right through this. We're going to keep moving. And so you don't necessarily have one zone where you stay in, your emotions are just fluctuating.
Exactly. And I think that's the piece. It is a fluid moment to moment. Someone said to me recently as I was sitting with them, and I thought it was so inspirational, they described this process as they can't get away from themselves because life has forced them to slow down. That's a very powerful moment. When I or any of us have to face ourselves, because from moment to moment we could have a myriad of thoughts and feelings. Well, how do I do that? At the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, we talk about a lot how to use the breath, how to breathe, how to identify what's going on in the moment and observe it, because we have a choice in how we react to it. And when we model that, we not only model that in terms of good self-care, particularly psychobiologically, but we model that for children. And we also become aware of other, not other in terms of difference, but how we are actually all one species, human beings, and what I do impacts another. And right now we're experiencing that more profoundly than ever.
And, it's interesting because we have seen, even with the panic that people have felt, rightly so in some degrees, and also because of the nature of how information has come out, that there's this kind of like, okay, what's going to happen today kind of feeling. Right. But also there have been beautiful stories that I'm sure we've all seen on social media of where people have, I'm thinking of the young man who went and sang outside his elderly mother's or grandmother's nursing home because she's contained and he's not allowed to go in. And so he was singing to her so she could stand on the balcony. Just very creative things that people are doing, saying, okay, well, I can't go to the hospital and cheer people up, but I can. What can I do? And that's a better place maybe to be in.
Right. I wept when I saw that story, Barbara, because, that's a gift of love, and it is a gift of generosity and creativity that individual gave to his mother and to his family and to himself and to the world now. That is a lovely example. It also moved me because I think, as I myself am currently writing a musical and about mental health, and the creative arts are a very profound way to express what goes on emotionally that has an impact that is bigger than just the person who is creating the art. It's universal. And we have that capacity right now. Our ability to be creative and think outside the box. I mean, regardless of what side of the aisle someone sits on politically, look at what our leaders are trying to do in the moment. That is amazing.
They're trying to work together.
They're trying to work together. Look at what people are doing in generosity of the heart. Get people giving away food. Doctors going out, putting themselves on the front line. You literally offering the public a service as a way to give insight, knowledge, and hope. This is not needing to be a doom and gloom. We have a lot of possibility here. But does it take work? Even more so now. Even more so now. So I think when you ask a lot of the questions you're asking, what I think it is inviting us to do is to really be creative, be aware of our thinking and our emotions, taking that triad and working them together to be in a relaxation response enough to be mindful of the choices I make in my words and my behaviors. That's what I can do. And those behaviors include knowing if I'm in a high-risk population, not exposing myself to the public in social isolation, which is not easy. Not easy. Knowing that I have to groom myself more attentively because my potential body and presence could have an impact on another. That's thoughtful and respectful, not only of myself, but another human being.
And, it's interesting, Michael, because a lot of the ways that people, as you mentioned, sometimes when people are forced to slow down, they kind of have to look at themselves in the mirror and they may or may not like what they see, depending. I don't mean visually.
Right.
Emotionally, or they're just want to get away from themselves. And a lot of the ways that people do that, and this is not to say that they're negative ways, but those options are not available. You can't go to the racetrack. You can't go to the bar. You can't go to the restaurant. You can't even go to church or to temple or to anywhere like that where you would normally have some kind of solace, some kind of place just to kind of be off duty or to receive some sort of emotional support or just a little time off. None of those options are available to you. So what I hear you saying is that we now need to look for other areas to do that.
Yes, exactly. I had a very dear friend who is on her way or is in Georgia right now and has a parent dying, and they may not be able to have a public service. That's significant.
Very difficult.
So we're talking about the spectrum of experiences, both joyful, whether they're experiences where people self-soothe or self-medicate, or whether they're experiences of the rituals of life, suddenly the normative experience of gathering, getting connected, physically present with another person is suggested you don't do. Wow, talk about having to find creativity in a new way. I mean, we're in it on steroids right now.
And, it's sort of ironic because, we have always talked about, how we get self-absorbed in like our social media. And now that we are supposed to socially distance, we do find that actually we are quite social creatures. And as a matter of fact, I went to reach out to somebody to shake hands today, totally forgetting for the moment that that's a bozo no-no. And there was just this horrified look on the person's face. And of course, I realized right away, and I apologized, and I extended an elbow, as anyone would do. And sometimes you do have to laugh. It's just, that also helps. But
it's like the chicken dance.
Exactly right. But that's one of those things where you go, wait a minute, we really are social creatures. Wait a minute, when I see my neighbor, we've been walking on the street with we're like, we can still walk side by side, a little bit apart out in the fresh air. But normally we would greet each other with a hug or a pat on the back or a high five or blow a kiss or whatever. Now we're, everybody is quite staying far away from one another. And that it's just an interesting dynamic to think we really are made to have this connection with one another.
Barbara, I so feel gratitude when I speak with you because I think you think so philosophically and psychologically in such a natural way. And when you talked about the social media and the interactions, actually this is the benefit of social media. It can do very powerful things. We're now seeing its powerful platform in everything from Zoom, to other platforms or Skype or FaceTiming or, it has a power for good as well. And I think utilizing those platforms for good and utilizing our words as vessels to communicate that sometimes what we communicated in a physical expression we now can put into words. That matters. And that's a powerful way for us to utilize words for help and healing.
And one of the things that I know that you had mentioned this earlier, Michael, for the help and healing is that people, like you mentioned, your friend heading to Georgia, that even if we have an elderly relative or neighbor who's nearby, someone we're connected with or someone we're concerned about, we are reticent to knock on the door because we may be younger and we don't want to spread it and we're afraid, but we want to help, and then we're conflicted inside and then all of those feelings. What's your counsel there?
Right. I think, and this is an axiom that I have followed pretty consistently throughout my life. I don't know where I learned it. I have this thing when I think of a person, regardless if it's extemporaneous or I have, something that I need to connect with them on, I usually reach out. It matters because in a moment, our thought is a connection with that person. And to say to another person, I thought of you today. You were in my mind and in my heart, and I just wanted to reach out. It's an act of love, and it's an act of community. It's communing. And when you spoke about how do we deal with, for instance, people who are self-quarantined that might need help, or we know we might want to reach out. Can we get something for you? Is there something I can do? With those of us who have less of a risk factor, it's not that that's the opportunity to be less cautious. It's actually an opportunity to be more mindful. That on some level, your less risk factor means that you could potentially do more good for others in a way by your words and acts of service. So I find that right now what we're needing to do is really reach out to one another in ways that if we think of someone or we know of somebody that is in strife and we allow ourselves to extend ourselves to that person, we could potentially do something that's helpful and healing. And what an act of love and also an act of good citizenship. It's good citizenship right now. And we have an opportunity to regain citizenship in a very, very powerful way with one another. And I hope we do that.
I do too, and I'm thinking of myself in a very negative way at the moment because you feel this compulsion to go to the grocery store.
Right.
And I can't tell you where that comes from. I don't know. It's bizarre. And then you go to the grocery store and you think, I'm just going to get a couple of things. And then you see people with their carts and you see the empty shelves. And then you have this sort of this sense of, wait a minute. And then in the course of the work here at the radio station that we do, I just was in contact with someone from a nonprofit here in the D.C. area. And they were saying that they help feed the homeless and take care of the homeless and families in need. And they're saying that their donations from grocery stores are way down because guess what? We're hoarding it all.
Right.
And that was one of those moments, one of those light bulbs where you go, wait a minute, my personal fear to even provide for my family, which is a decent thought, is now impacting people who have nothing because now the stores are sold out so that the food that they normally had left over that would be passed on to a nonprofit and then therefore shared with people who are homeless, people who are truly at risk. They already have compromised systems, many of them, and families that are struggling right now. So I have a full pantry and now they have less. That's not good.
So, it's insightful that you can connect the dot with the fear. And I think that connecting the dot with the fear is what all of us have to deal with. And we're all going to have moments where we're going to be reflective and thought, wow, that fear really got the best of me, whether it's I spent more money at the grocery store or my fear got the best of me that I stayed hidden under my covers. Those are two different expressions of fear. My point being is I think all of us are shaken at our core around life changing on a dime, and we're still recalibrating. In that recalibrating, I think, however, that a 2-year-old once said this to me, which I found to be deliciously insightful. They were eating, and I was watching this 2-year-old eat, and they offered me something to eat. And baby was almost 3. And they looked at me and they said, yum-yums for 2 are better than yum-yums for 1.
Oh.
That there is a joy in us sharing with another because we don't feel alone. We feel joined. Biologically, we are joined together as a species. So if we can share, if we can give, not at our own expense, because self-care is important here also. If we can give, whether it's food, our time, our words, our thoughts, and even our intentions, and some people call that prayer, those prayers, that matters right now. It matters more than ever. And that is also needing to be balanced with how do I do a good self-care plan for myself? For instance, am I getting enough sleep? Am I making sure I'm taking care and getting hydrated? Am I cleaning myself? Am I taking care of my affairs? more than ever, we have an opportunity. I don't know that if it's synchronistic or not, but happens to be tax time. I mean, we have an opportunity to do some administrative things that none of us expected we would have this much time. But we have time in our homes. And to have that kind of home, hearth, and health, even if it's uncomfortable, it is an opportunity and a gift. And to be able to extend that beyond myself thoughtfully and mindfully and aware of my actions in comparison to others and in communion with others, I could help myself and others. And I think that's what you were spotlighting in your example. That's brilliant. And I appreciate your reflection.
Well, and I'm just so thankful that you keep using the word opportunity, because people have said to me there are silver linings here, as you pointed out. I mean, how many times have we said, oh, I wish we had more time together as a family? Well, guess what? You got some more time for most folks. I mean, there are folks who are working even more. And also there is maybe a benefit to learning to live with less. Because we have always had so much, at least here in this nation, for most people. I don't want to say everybody, but there is also that gift of saying, you know what? I don't need to have my favorite fill in the blank at the exact moment that I could actually do without it for a little while.
Exactly. I have one thing to just say to this. You know, Dr. Jim Gordon, who is the founder of the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, he wrote an article that actually was featured in the San Francisco Chronicle, I believe. But he wrote an article that I thought was interesting. It was, "Did God send us Trump to save us?" In a way, and it's sort of save us from, our own sense of, and he did it through the lens of self-absorption. Are we maybe looking only at one aspect of the expression of ego, which can be about self-absorption, or can it be about self-expression? And he actually sort of looks at this through a lens of, what's the silver lining here? Because everybody is doing a lot of mudslinging, whether it's against the administration or other, I'm very apolitical, so I'm trying to stay apolitical intentionally. But what I'm trying to stay with in this example, Barbara, is we could make this about one person, and that's the danger. It's not about one person. It's about us working together. We need to work together. And mudslinging and that is not what we need to do. What we need to do, Dr. Gordon very much said, is let's focus on the opportunities. Let's get out of othering and name-calling and be connected as a human species. And he utilized this particular example of what we're doing in othering in a different framework. And I found the article helpful about, look, we're human beings. That's what we are. And we need to be joined together and respect one another, regardless of our differences. Now we are more alike than ever before in our consciousness.
And that is absolutely what you started us with, that this coronavirus has leveled the playing field, that we're all dealing with it in our own different ways, but that we're better when we try to help one another and remember that we're not alone in this, and that's an important aspect as well. We just have a couple of seconds left, so I just want to thank Michael Shea from the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, a clinical social worker with a private practice here in D.C. Michael, if folks want to reach out to you or to your center, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the center's website address is www.cmbm.org. And the center will be offering some things to the public about how to deal with the stress of the coronavirus. We're in the process of that. And should you want to reach out to me, my website address is www.michaelfshea.com. shea.com.
And we will have that on our website as well. I want to thank Michael Shea for joining me today on DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. I'm Barbara Britt.